I'm like,
this is
I
the
don't
blind leading
even...
the blind right now.
Oh, majorly.
Okay, what about the Old Testament?
Well, not like what is the difference between the Old and New Testament? But
I don't know.
But I actually don't know. Like,
I don't know either. Hey, what's going on, you guys? Welcome to Beckoning Brilliance. I'm your host, Becca Booka, and today I'm joined by my friend, Rachael. She's a Reiki master, but today we're going to be chatting about the big man, aka God. She and I are both very new into having a relationship with God and reading the Bible, so we have a lot of questions. We're very curious about a lot of things, so hopefully it doesn't offend anybody. We're just trying to have an honest conversation about what that looks like, getting into God in your 30s. So let's get into it. Rachael, hi.
Hi.
How's it going?
Pretty good.
Have you ever done a podcast before?
I have.
You have?
Yeah. I think two with the same girlfriend of mine. I think that's it.
Great. So you've done more podcasts than I have. You should be leading this.
No, I've always been the guest. I'm better when I'm led.
Okay. Well, hopefully I can lead you in the right way. So are you a Reiki master?
I am a Reiki master.
Love it. You recently just added your story on how you got into Reiki on your Instagram and on your website. And so I read all of that. And just to give a little background, you were doing nutritional coaching and you said that you were praying for a way to help heal your clients further. And then you had an injury, which led you to discovering your talents. I'm curious if you would tell us more about that.
Yeah. I think I've always been drawn to health and wellness and really trying to help people understand that. And I think it's really more about ownership for me, like ownership and education. And I just wasn't really getting to the place that I needed to with people and that they needed, honestly. Mm-hmm. I think when I reflect on it now, I see what was really happening. And that's why it's taken me so long to tell that story, because I didn't really even understand at the time how that question was being answered or how that prayer was being answered, however you want to look at that. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it was like we had started skating a lot that winter, and I don't know, I hadn't really skated in years, but it was like we were super into it, just all the time going out, like just terrible. But it was so fun. And we had gone out one night and I was on the ice for 30 seconds and my foot got lodged in this crack and I lurched forward and then just flew back and I landed so fucking hard on my tailbone that I bounced back up onto my hands and knees. And I was like, what in the fuck just happened? That hurt so bad. I mean, and I just basically thankfully there was ice everywhere. So I just laid there trying to understand what had just happened. And when I think back to that moment now, I felt like somebody slammed me on the ice. And the words that I hear are sit down. And to me, that was God. That was divine intervention of you're asking for something, but you're not listening.
Sure.
Classic. Yeah. Right. So, after that, it was, thankfully I had access to chiropractic and was already in that sphere. So that really helped with the healing process. But it was all of a sudden I was just very different. The way that I was seeing things, the way that I was seeing myself was very different. Mm-hmm. And I just really started having different ideas and revelations. And, at the time there was, I've heard people talk about a Kundalini rising or that we hold specific genetic codes in our tailbone and that can be awakened through a really hard fall on the tailbone. I don't know. Maybe that's what happened. Right. But either way, something changed for sure. And that integrated for a couple of months. And it was one night I randomly asked my boyfriend, Kyle, I was like, hey, can I try to do some energy work on you? I don't even know where this came from, right? I had I have maybe had one Reiki session. Like, I went to see this woman when we lived out in Utah, and I truly don't even know if what she did was Reiki. I don't know. Maybe, probably, but it was some form of energy work, and that would be my only experience, my only information about it. So I had started at his feet, I think, and I was just like trying to kind of be intuitive about it because I didn't know what to do. I didn't really know where to start.
Yeah.
I had set, an intention of wanting this to be for the highest good. I think even back then that was really my intention.
So let's back up here. So did you have like just energy build up in your body and you felt like you needed to express it, or like what prompted you to actually be like, hey, can I try this on you?
I don't know.
Okay.
I honestly, maybe that will become more clear to me with more time.
Sure.
But at this point, I'm like, I do not know what inspired me to ask him that.
Well, kudos to him for being open to it. And he wasn't like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, he's down. He's always just like, yeah, sure, whatever. You can do that.
Yeah.
So it's great. And yeah, thankfully, like, I had a willing participant and somebody who was like, yeah, I don't have no fucking idea what you're going to do, but go ahead.
You're like, same.
Yeah. So there were a number of things that came up in the session, and it was the session. That wasn't the session at the time. But the most profound experience that I had was like this feeling of somebody, the visual I got was like somebody was dumping these gold coins, and they were just like flying onto my chest and bouncing into Kyle. And it was this expression of like divine love. Like, it was like, I didn't want to move because it felt so good. It was like, I have never felt a love like this, like being transferred into somebody else. I don't know if I've ever had something like that powerful. I mean, I have, but like that was a different experience because I was using my energy and I was so involved, which is, now I know a little bit. Dangerous is probably an extreme word, but it was a little bit.
Yeah, opening yourself up like that. Had you ever had visuals like that before?
I'm starting to think that yes, but I probably at a young age, and I think I probably shut them down.
Or you're just like, oh, this is just my imagination, or...
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of kids have that experience. I think a lot of people have that experience, and then, your parent or whatever, and it's not necessarily for any reason other than just like, I don't know, they're trying to guide you in the right direction of like, that's not happening, but it's like, it is fucking happening. So haven't you had that experience?
Oh God. So I've taken a psychic development class, and I've also done hands-on healing work. So that's why I asked the question about the energy, because with that modality, like my hands will heat up and they almost feel full and they almost feel like they've fallen asleep. And it's like, it's uncomfortable. So I feel like I need to like get it out of my body. So that's why I was wondering if you had that feeling. Like, so anyway, during the psychic development class, there's a bunch of different ways that you can be psychic. So, there's clairaudience, there's clairsentience, there's all these things. And the visual, when the teacher was explaining it to me, I really don't think that I get that. I'm more clairaudient. It sounds crazy, but I can hear messages, which even up until that point, I always thought they were just my thoughts. I was just like, oh, my mind is going crazy. And it's like, no, it's actually messages that I can channel from God or my spirit guides or whoever it is. So no, I don't believe I've ever had the visual, which I've always been kind of jealous, but I know you and I have talked about that. And you're like, do you really want to see things? Do you really want that? Are you sure?
Yeah. Cause sometimes it kicks in and you're like, oh, I don't need that right now. I don't need that right now.
Yeah.
But,
do you get them when you're just randomly talking to people?
Sometimes, like, I have been way more protective of my energy when I'm with people, and like, it's not something that I turn on. Like, I think that there is an element of integrity with that, but it's this unethical, like for me to like be in an experience with somebody and be like, I'm trying to tap into shit, and also like there's going to be protection that comes in to stop me from doing that anyway. But I think that when people are open to me and then we're having a longer conversation, then I'll start to see things. And that's kind of happened with us. Like when you're telling me things, like I'll have a body sensation or I'll like kind of see something, but I think that is in part because you're open to me.
Sure. Of course. That makes sense.
So a lot of things that affect that.
Definitely. So the elephant in the room. the reason we're here.
The big man?
The big man. So I met you a couple of years ago. You actually came in as a client of mine. And I don't know how you feel, but I felt like we connected really fast. Mm-hmm. And someone that's a really big part in my life, her name is Anne. I could talk about her for hours, but she does a lot of work with energy and intuitive guiding and nutrition. And if you even made eye contact with me, you've heard me talk about Anne. I have been telling Rachael about all of my sessions with Anne and all the help that she has given to me. And you actually decided to have a session with her. And we were kind of given the same advice about exploring God and our relationship with God and what that means. It's so weird that I feel like uncomfortable talking about it. I feel like I'm coming out of the closet.
Well, it kind of is like that, right? I mean, and I think that that's probably because I've been judgmental about people in their relationship with God. And I've seen a lot of examples of religion. And I'm like, I don't know that I think that's cool.
Correct. Same. I think that's it too, where if someone were to tell me anything about going to church or anything about their religion, I would automatically judge them and assume they are a certain way immediately. Wouldn't even, not to say that I wouldn't like them, but it's like, oh, we're probably not going to get along. You're probably going to think I'm trash, or you're probably going to think XYZ, you know? You know what I mean? You'll probably think I'm trash, right? So it's really weird for me to start having a relationship with God and reading the Bible and just trying to figure out what all that looks like. And it's like, oh God, like now people might judge me like that. Like that's really, it's fucked up to think about. Mm-hmm. You know?
Well, okay. So did you tell me the full story then of when you really did start reading the Bible, or were you maybe not fully honest with me about when you did start reading the Bible and like you were
you
kind
think
of
I'm lying?
When you were like kind of more into it, or was it really the same timeline of when I was like, I love God. I have had all these revelations. Like there's nothing stopping me. I'm reading the Bible. I'm into this.
You were into it hard, but I feel like you also had more of a relationship growing up than I did. Like I went through my first communion, and even when I sat in church and, you know, like went to religion, it just never resonated with me. And my sister and I, we went to church basically to please our grandparents, from my understanding. I remember asking my mom questions and she's like, I don't know. Because I think she was tapped out. She had to go to Catholic school. And I think that really, you know, did a number on her. So I grew up having no relationship with God, not knowing anything. I've never read the Bible. Like it's wild for me to read it. And even from like a surfacey pop culture standpoint, I'm like, oh, so Coolio didn't write that lyric. Oh, Avenged Sevenfold. Oh, that's from the Bible. Like I had no idea. So yeah, it's like, I kind of feel dumb as I'm reading it. And I'm like, how have I not even been exposed to this? Like all these stories and ideas that so many people, even if they reject them, they're at least still familiar with them. But no, so it all started like probably 2 years ago. It was during winter in Minnesota, which is really rough on everyone. I just felt really, really depressed and suicidal, honestly. And I remember reaching out to Anne and I was like, I don't know what to do. Like, I feel like there's no point to life. And she was like, what's your relationship with God like? And I remember I got so mad. I think I threw my phone across the room and I was like, why does she always have to bring it back to God? Why? It's like the only thing she ever wants to talk about when I'm pissed off or when I'm feeling like this. And so she was like, I think you should explore what that means to you, what that looks like. And she's like, I feel like I would also have no purpose in life if I didn't have a relationship with God. And it's so weird because she's the smartest person I know, and I listen to her and advice about literally everything. So I don't know why there was this resistance with me about God, but I was like, okay, I trust you wholeheartedly. So stupid, but I'm like, where do I even get a Bible? Can you just like walk into Target and get a Bible? I had no idea. I'm like on Barnes and Noble and I'm like, okay, I want the prettiest one, like just really, you know, making a show out of this. Yeah. So I go and I get it. And I remember I posted it on Instagram. I posted it on my stories and everyone was like, what are you doing? like, why are you reading the Bible? And I was like, well, I've just never read it. And which it's like funny for me to think that I was looking for external validation at that point. Like, hey, let me put this out. Let me flex on the gram. Let me get right. You know what I mean? So it was interesting because certain people were like, what are you doing? And other people were like, good for you. I'm really proud of you. And I got the King James version and people were like, you're stupid. That's so hard to get through. I tried reading it and I was like, I'd like to think that I'm somewhat intelligent, but it was really hard for me to get through. So I was consistent with it for a couple of weeks and then I stopped. And then she just gathered dust. Circling back to your question, I did not get into it again until I moved down here. So I moved from Minnesota to Texas, for anyone that doesn't know, which is so cliche. Like, oh, I moved to the Bible Belt and I start having a relationship with the Lord. Like, that's kind of cringe, but it's not cringe. Sorry, God. But, so again, so I was at the same kind of point. I wasn't like suicidal. It was just like, okay, I made this really big change in my life. Here I am. What is the point? What am I doing here? And it was the same. I reached out to Anne and same question. What's your relationship with God like? And I'm like, okay, I have all this downtime on my hands. Like, let me just try doing this. And because you had reached out to Anne and you had a session with her, she actually told me, I know you guys are friends. Otherwise this would be like a client confidentiality issue, but you guys are both kind of in the same boat as far as exploring God. Maybe you should do like a Bible study. I'm like, what? What? Are you serious right now?
What?
Yeah, come again. So no, I did not lie to you. I got the Bible a couple years ago. I tried it. It didn't stick. And I think like most people who end up finding God, they come to a kind of a crossroad in their life or like a rock bottom where they're like, YOLO, like what else? What else do I have left? Like, let's try it out. Fuck it. Yeah. So I think that's where I was. And it's been nice having you by my side, like trying to navigate this because I do have a lot of questions. A lot of it doesn't make sense to me. And I don't know. It's just interesting, like how I grew up and viewed everyone else. And now to see the changes in myself after reading the Bible and after starting a relationship with God, like all the positive changes I've had, I'm like, I've been missing out on this. That's my long-winded story. So seeing as how you have had more of a relationship with God, how has your life changed now that you have invited him back into your life? Yes.
Now that I've found God and I'm
now that you found the
like when people used to say that. Yeah, when people used to say that, I was like, what the fuck? But then like literally I one day was like, no, I'm born again. I have found God. He was here the whole time. I was shutting him out. It's me. It's all, and for the record, it's always me, right?
Same.
Right. Like just whenever you're running into an issue in your life, just know it's you.
Yeah.
I will say that reading the Bible has made it like, it's so, I mean, to call it cryptic, I do think it's kind of cryptic. I don't know. Maybe that's kind of an insulting word, but it's like, then when I read anything else, I fly through it. Cause it's like, I have to be so focused. I'm like, I'm sorry. What was that? Wow. I think when I was younger, I spent a lot of time with my aunts, and my dad's family is pretty Catholic, or they were all raised Catholic, and some of them still are very much in that practice, and some of them have really stepped away from it. And I asked a lot of questions. I asked my aunt a lot of questions, and she, a very devout Catholic, is that how you would say it?
Yeah.
So she was very open to answering them. But that was one perspective. And then for whatever reason, and I think it was largely driven by like my relationship with her, that I decided to go to confirmation. Like both of my parents were like, what are you doing? Do we have to come to something eventually? Like, do we need to pay for this? I hope we don't need to pay for this. Okay, Rach, you can walk to the church. That's all good. Go ahead. But it was like, I mean, it was kind of a shit show, like it was kids and like the pastor's talking and we're literally like talking. We're just little assholes, honestly. But anyway, so I went and did that. And I feel like for a long time, like I would like pray at night and I would call on God. And I don't know at what point I was like, I honestly think that it was this thing of like feeling like it wasn't cool to be
Yeah.
into God.
I still kind of struggle with that.
Like,
Not
that's
gonna
so
lie.
embarrassing, though. Like, yo, he created this. Like,
I
it's the
know.
only connection we've got, really. And so I'm embarrassed by that.
So I just had a session with Anne the other day, and she asked me this question. She was like, would you feel more embarrassed to tell someone that you have been reading the Bible or that you watched a porno?
What did
And
you
I was like,
say?
I mean, it depends on my audience, obviously. But I think overall, I watched a porn last night or whatever. I feel like I'd feel maybe less embarrassed, which is messed up. That's crazy. Actually, the example that she also gave me was I saw Lil Nas X in concert a couple years ago. And she was like, yeah, you know, like in his videos, he's like having sex with the devil and, you know, all this stuff. And whatever you feel about that, it's still just like that imagery. She's like, would you feel more embarrassed to tell someone that you're going to see Lil Nas X or that you're reading the Bible? And I was like, oh, I would have no problem telling people. I mean, it's all over my Instagram too. I'm like, I saw Lil Nas X, you know? So I just think those kinds of questions are interesting. It's like, okay, like where we've come as a society, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Like, we're both really in this place of wonder. Yeah, it's kind of like a mystical curiosity, I feel like. 'Cause there's a lot that I don't understand. Like, I feel comfortable in doing this relationship with God in my own way, but like there's just so much that I'm like, I don't get that. I don't get that yet. And I think that probably in some ways, the way that I talk about it, like some people would be like, that's really insulting. But I think that now at this point, I feel that it's true that we get to have our own individual relationships with God, and God is not judging us. Like,
Agreed.
He's trying to help you get to the best version of yourself, or, you know, whatever it is you came here to do. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that there is like, it's the people that place the judgment on you and your relationship with God.
I mean, even me just saying that story about porn and Lil Nas X, I was immediately like, oh, great, I'm probably going to be canceled now, you know? People are going to think I'm terrible. But it's honest though. It's real. Mm-hmm. It's like, I feel like having these questions and just questioning things in general, like how else do you have that true knowing for yourself if you don't challenge things versus just accepting everything blindly? Like, oh, I don't understand this, but yeah, it's fact. Yeah. You know?
Yeah.
I think it's good to ask questions, and let's take God out of the equation, I guess. It's like any other relationship that I would have with anyone else. If I didn't agree with something that they said or they did, I would ask them questions. So like, why is God exempt?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Like I think you did ask me about, I want to come back to that because I do want to share that because my Reiki practice and my relationship with God, like initially did not coincide, but I will say that like now when I reflect back, there are those moments of, I'm like, that was God. There's no other way that I can explain that sensation, that power, that bigness other than like, that was God. Like in that moment on the ice, and then having that experience with Kyle and like the things that came through with that, and then seeking out, like a Reiki certification. And I remember now, and I don't think I've talked about this in my very first like level 1 training. She had us like, you're just practicing. Like I'm like, I don't fucking know what I'm doing. I'm supposed to feel the energy in my hands. I don't know. But I had an experience of feeling like someone came in and it was like this. And I will say that when I experience God, it is is androgynous the right word? Like no gender? No, it's like both genders. It's like male, female energy. Mm-hmm. Like putting their hands on my shoulders, but facing me and like coming down and like kissing me on the forehead. But like, that was it. But I was like, who else could that be? Right. Yeah. Like, but it was like this experience of like everything, right? Mm-hmm. The male, the female, the balance, the whatever it was. So that actually like just recently came back to me, and I was like, there it was again.
Interesting.
For a while when I was practicing Reiki, like I think that a lot of people who practice Reiki are like, oh, I'm going to call in your spirit guides, or I'm going to call in my spirit guides. And I don't necessarily think that there's something wrong with that. And I think that really when doing Reiki, it's about the intention that you hold. Like, I am holding an intention for the highest and greatest good, and whatever shows up is of the highest and greatest good, nothing else. And, connecting with spirit guides, if you feel confident in that, I think is okay. If you know for sure that's who it is. And honestly, Anne is the one that challenged me on that. And that challenge changed my entire Reiki practice, I feel. Because it was like the first conversation I had with her. I was like, hey, I need to build my practice, but it becomes challenging with this work of existing in the world, because I need to be able to shut it off. Kind of like the question you asked me earlier. Like, I have to be very intentional about shutting that off and protecting myself because of just how my energy is. And my question to her was, how can I further protect myself and create these boundaries so that I can do more? And that was, when she asked the classic question, what's your relationship with God? I'm like,
that question.
Yeah, what is your relationship with God? And she's like, I'm not saying that you have to have one, but you need to have a relationship with something, and you need to know why. And I'm like, yeah, this is valid, right? And then it was this question of like, okay, so what are you doing now? What are you using for protection? Who are you calling on? How do you know it's them? I'm like, ooh, these are great questions that I do not have the answer to. Yeah. And not that I think what I was doing before was dangerous, but I think that it could be better, right? And that question was really a catalyst to making it that way. And so it was like I had that session with her, and it was so fucking profound, and I literally couldn't even speak afterward. I was like, I can't even fathom saying hello to a person for days.
She'll
but
do
it
that.
was, she'll lock you. But in the best way. 100%. But it was like that moment was the moment of, I went to a sauna after that, and I kind of extended my hands up, and I was like, okay, God, it's me and you. I'm not going to be having any communication with anybody else. I'm not going to call on anything else. I am just going to call on you for these sessions that I have moving forward. And it was this visual of this golden kind of experience of hands reaching out, but in between was this very, very big void, these mountains of darkness. And I'm like, holy shit, you're really far away. I'm like, this is scary. I felt like I've always had these connections previously, but it's were they even real? Were they even powerful? And it was just it was this very reassuring, but also very lonely, visual. And then it was this little golden path, comes through the mountains of I'm here, you can always reach up to me, but there is a path, that, but it was the tiniest little dash marks. I'm like, fuck. And it was I pull my hands away, and then I'm like, okay, I'm freaking out again. I'm reaching my hands back up. I'm like, are you still there? He's like, yeah, I've been here. Right. Yeah. And then at that point, I was pulling cards a lot more frequently, and
tarot cards.
I don't pull tarot cards. I mean, occasionally I will, but usually it's oracle cards.
Okay.
And I was doing that a lot, but yeah, I think it was the next day then, because I was I had to sit with all of that, and just I didn't even. There was also nothing to do. It was the processing was done. It had already been done, but I just was I don't know what the fuck. I don't know how to be with all this information at all.
Yes.
So, yeah, I think it was just the next day, I'm like, okay, I'm going to really try to tap into this connection with God. And I had been pulling my Bible on and off the shelves for the past, year. Because I was telling people, I'm going to read the Bible this year. And then I would start, and I'm like, no, not happening. And so I was pulling cards, and I was like, listen, I never try to what is the word, tempt faith or like test faith. But I was like, you need to show me a particular card. Like I need, like
you're
God, like,
gaslighting God.
Yeah.
If you're real, if you really exist, I need you to do this for me.
I was so desperate. He was probably like, wow, if I don't show her, she's going to really spin off the planet. But like, really, then that was the card that I pulled. And it was this yes card, which was, you know, she's holding up, I think, a triangle, which reminded me of the Trinity. And in the card, there's like these mountains and there's this little like path through it. And I was like, what the fuck, dude? He's real. It's real. Honestly, like it was a wild moment. And then I was like so emotional because I was like, I can't believe I've shut him out. And then I was like, you're so dumb. You can't shut him out, Rachael. Like, he's always there, you know? And then it was like, I think probably a minute after that, I like run to find my Bible, and I had opened it up several times. And it's like, then I open it up and there's these little notes from my grandma. And I couldn't even, I was heave crying. I'm like, I was like, wow, this is way too much. Yeah. Way too much happening right now. Really beautiful. But in 100%. The moment, goodness.
God's like, I'm going to make you never forget me again.
Like, yeah, I think that's how I learn my lessons, is I just need to be really struggling down and out, and then the light comes
Get your ass
in.
slammed on the ice.
Yeah, exactly.
That's intense. I feel like I've had some kind of somewhat similar evidence-based things that have happened to me too. But I was going to ask you, during your sessions and everything, obviously you said that you feel like they've improved. For me, I've always been, well, I shouldn't say always, but since my early 20s, I've been a very like spiritual person. I always consider myself that, but the word God always rubbed me the wrong way. Or it just never resonated with me. So I've always been like, yeah, the universe, like kind of like law of attraction type stuff, where now that I think about all that stuff, it's like, it's so passive, you know? It's like, yeah, just think happy thoughts and like, I'll manifest all this stuff, where now having a relationship with God, it just seems it seems more active. It seems more concrete and stable. Do you feel like that too? Like even when you, like how you were talking about with like the Reiki, how you are now just going to God versus like, let's just see what happens.
Yeah, I think because I don't really know what word to use, but it feels more solid for sure.
Yeah.
Because it's like, I think that I would call on the universe for a lot of things, but when I was like really down and out, or just like, I don't know what to do, that was when I would be like, God, you need to help me today. I'm fucked. You know, like I need your help. And then like something would shift. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, and now, like, as you know, this past time that I talked to Anne, she was like, what if we do a month without the cards and you just talk to God? And I was like, sure. Uh-huh. And I swear that it's only been 2 times this in the whole month of January where I was like, I've been trying to talk to God like a desperate lunatic. I'm like, okay, so if I see this, then that's going to mean this. Okay, so.
Right?
Oh, asking questions constantly. But it's like, I get the response when I need the response. 100%. So more pure. Yeah, I think more pure or like more solid is what I would say. Whereas like when I would communicate with the universe, I think that you get in the way. You get in the way and you try to make things and try to make meaning of things that, you know, like this, I believe that the synchronicities are a real thing. And I think that it's important. I don't know. Like, I think it's real, but I think that we get in the way and interpret that sometimes how we want it, versus when you do tap into that connection and you know what that looks like, kind of how you express, like how it comes in, you know, like in the front of your head, like that is, I can rely on that, I feel.
Yeah, and what she's talking about with it being in front of my head. So seeing as how I can channel messages, the way that I've always explained it to someone is it sounds like someone is standing like in front of me to my left. And every time I would, pray or just talk out loud, I would always hear messages from that, that perspective or that, just that area, front left. And then once I started actually talking to God, it's like front and center. It sounds like someone is either like not talking down to me in a bad way, but like someone is like standing over me and like it's like washing over my crown or my third eye. It's just, it's so different and it just feels more solid.
So does he respond to you a lot? Because I feel like I'm out here just desperate.
Are you being jealous right now?
A little bit.
Are you feeling jealous?
This past month, I would have liked some more communication, but I think I got exactly what I needed. Classic.
Yeah. This has been my morning routine as of late. Again, this was suggested by Anne. This is the Anne fan club over here, by the way. Oh yeah. Big fan. So let's back up here. She was like, I mean, there's people in the world that they'll check their phone before they even pray or like talk to God. And I'm like, me. And like 98% of me. Yeah, literally. She's like, how does that make you feel in the morning when you just like, are on Instagram? And I'm like, not great. She's like, she gave me the same thing, like just for a month, like, why don't you sleep with your phone on airplane mode, wake up and do whatever your morning routine is. And I was like, what do you do? And what do you do? And she's like, I wake up, I read the Bible, I journal. She goes for a walk every morning with her husband. And I was like, okay. So I tried doing that, slept with my phone on airplane mode, and then I would wake up and I would read the Bible. And minus me going home for Christmas to my parents' house, I've literally done it every morning. And I am not a morning person. And so every morning I wake up with my eyes like half open and I'm like, I can't believe I'm reading the fucking Bible right now. Sorry, it's probably like a terrible sentence, but that's literally what I say. I'm like, I cannot believe I'm reading the Bible at 6:30 in the morning and I'm the King James version. Like, I don't know what I'm reading. I'm trying to make, heads and tails of everything. And so I'll do that. And then I sit down and then I pray. And then I write in my journal. And so I feel like with my journal, even if I don't necessarily hear a message back, if it's not very clear, because some days I don't hear anything. But then when I write down in a journal, that is like channeling something. So do I have, hotline bling, a direct line to God? He doesn't always pick up, at least not that I can hear. Maybe he is like muted. Maybe he's muted on the other end.
Sometimes.
No, you don't have to feel jealous because I feel like if anything, you probably have a more direct connection than I do. Just saying.
That's up for debate.
God, flip a coin. Who's your favorite?
Who do you like more? Like, see, and that's where we are just naive. Like, that is.
I know we're gonna like listen to this episode a year from now and we're gonna be like, dude, you're gonna be like, take this off of the internet. I can't believe people are listening.
But I think that people need to hear it because like, I don't know. I mean, because then I have had conversations with, some of my dad's siblings, my dad's family, and some of them have like kind of gotten back into religion or spirituality in a different way. And it's like their reasoning is, I think, like, just we're in a time of a lot of fear and we need to come back to God.
Yeah, there's just a lot of craziness and uncertainty in the world right now. And it really does give me hope and makes me feel like there's a point. Otherwise, like, what is the point? We're just like floating around, not knowing what's going on. Yeah. I don't know. And it's interesting too, like, as I'm trying to work my way through the Bible and understand some of the stories, it's like through these, like you said, you think they're kind of cryptic. I mean, it is hard. You do have to focus. So through some of these stories, it's like I can see the lessons that are unfolding. And it's so interesting how when you have that more active experience, when you're actually the one reading it and interpreting it versus someone like, oh, this is what happened in the Bible. And you're like, okay, word. But if you're actually reading it yourself and if your brain is the one that's functioning and trying to like make sense of all of it, it really sinks in a different way. Like I had an issue with the whole concept of worshiping God. I remember I reached out to Anne and I was like, is he insecure? Like, why does he need to be worshipped? Like, does he need a fan club? She was like, well, think about when you go to a concert. When you're at the concert and you're singing the lyrics and you're like, oh my God, I love them. She's like, you're worshiping whoever concert you're at. And I was like, okay, like that kind of makes sense. And then I thought about all the times where I wasn't thanked for something. Like if I did something nice, those instances where you want recognition, you're like, hey, can you just say thank you? Like at all? So in those moments where I felt put out, I was like, okay, that kind of makes sense because God literally created everything and you're not even going to say thank you. I get it. So it's like those moments where I'm like reading the Bible and I'm like, I don't get it. And it's almost like I have, I don't want to say a temper tantrum, but like a little hissy fit. Like, nope. It's like I'm finding all these ways to like go back to square one where I'm like, I don't believe in this. Nope, this rubs me the wrong way. It's like I keep on trying to like tap out and then something will push me through in my own personal life where I make that connection and I'm like, oh, okay, I got it. Like, sorry, God. Sorry.
I'm not as far along in reading it as you are still in Genesis, you know? Just powering through.
And it's hard.
I too have those moments. Like, honestly, every time I open it, I'm like, here I am reading the Bible. And like then if
the
Kyle
names
comes out, the names, the all of it. I'm like, I'm not tracking, but I'm just gonna keep moving.
There's some skimming that happens. This is like Game of Thrones for me, like, or like, you know, Lord of the Rings, where I'm like, I'm not following these names. I'm just gonna like hope that I don't need to know every single one of these names and every single one of these timelines and how they lived for 300 years. Okay, got it. Oh, his son lived for 245. Okay, like, do I have to remember all of that?
Right.
I hope not.
I know.
We'll find out. TBD.
We will find out. Yeah, you know, I think. I mean, isn't the Old Testament supposed to be? See, and I don't need, like, this is how naive I am, right? I'm like,
this is blind leading the blind right now.
Oh, majorly.
Okay, like, what about the Old Testament?
Well, not like what is the difference between the Old and New Testament? But
I don't know.
But I actually don't know. Like,
I don't know either. I'm not there yet.
It's going to be there for 6 months.
No, so like that's it too. So when I bought,
she's thick. Look,
dude, she is thick with 3 C's. She is real thick. Hey, that's a start. No, so I don't know the answer to that either. And then so even when I was posting on Instagram that I got my Bible, everyone's like, where are you starting? And I'm like, the front, the beginning. Page 1. Like, what do you mean? And they're like, oh my God, don't read it like that. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I didn't know there was other ways you could read it. I'm just reading it like a book, right? And so people are like, no, it's super confusing. The Old Testament's really boring. And I'm like, I don't know. Maybe this is just my like logic brain where I'm like, I'm just gonna start from the beginning and see what happens. So apparently, if most people that I've talked to, this is interesting too. Like people that I know that are religious, I was like, hey, I'm reading the Bible. And they're like, oh, I haven't read it. And I'm like, wait, what? You go to church all the time. And they're like, oh yeah, no, I haven't read it. And I'm like, what? So apparently in like Bible study, they will literally just like, I'm probably going to mess this up. Forgive me. But they'll pick chapters or they'll pick like books and they'll just dissect that. It's not like they kind of go through like bits and pieces. And then so at the end of, I don't know how many years they are doing this, at some point, then they will have read the entirety of the Bible. And I'm like, that just seems, I don't know why, that just doesn't make sense to me. So I'm just reading it front to back, start to finish. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, and I think that maybe that's where that question is coming from, because I feel like some people, or maybe that's what I've heard, is like read the New Testament first, or like read the New Testament, don't read the Old Testament. And like I think that I'm in the same place as you are. I'm like, no, I'm going to read the whole thing. I'm like, that's the point. I'm trying to understand this story, the whole thing, so I need to start at the beginning.
I agree. So I know that, so from what I've read, God's not super happy in the Old Testament. Like there's a lot of like violence, and I mean, some of the stuff that I've read when I first started, I was like, this is in the Bible? Like, this is lit. Like, if someone would have told me that there's like all this stuff here, I would have read it a long time ago. I'm like, there's a prostitute? Like, they're like incest? I don't know. It's wild. So I think there's a lot of, I don't know the word, hedonism. There's a lot of
Scandal.
There's a lot of scandal in the Old Testament, and so God isn't super happy. He's like, you know what? Fuck you guys.
That's it.
Flood
it.
Literally, get rid of all you guys. He's like, I tried to give you this. You fucked up. Bye. You're done. So there's a lot of that. So I think for most people, that's when I have told people that I'm starting, you know, from the beginning and reading it through, they're like, you're going to be really turned off by God. You're going to think this is like the example of why everyone who doesn't believe in God or isn't into religion, like this is why they're turned off from it, because they're picturing this like angry old dude up in the sky being like, nope, bye. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I was like, yeah, I kind of get that after reading it. And I also, reading the Old Testament, I can see how people would take all these words and twist them to fit their agenda, basically. I'm kind of glad that I'm reading it at this age where I feel like I have a more critical mind and I'm a little bit more flexible versus reading it and being like, oh, this is fact and this is the only way to interpret it. Whereas if you actually think about it, like there could be multiple ways to interpret any sentence.
Well, you know, and see, it's like I'm naive to even bringing this up, but it was like where I was at when I talked to Anne last time was right before this experience with Noah and his sons, right? And I think, and she was like, just so you know, this is what's coming up. There's a lot of ways that people interpret this. And it's like when I read it, I'm like, I don't know. I don't know how anybody could make a claim about what happened. It doesn't say. You know what I mean? I'm like, how are people? I think that like, I do feel like I am very good at seeing contrast and like being like, yeah, a lot of things can be true at one time. Like I don't really, I don't always think in terms of like, it's this or this. Like I can hold both.
Exactly.
And so it's like, as I'm reading that, I'm like, I don't know how anybody has made any decisions about what happened here. Like you weren't fucking there. Nothing. How do you know?
Yeah.
And like, there's nothing that says, I don't know. I mean, and that's the thing with there's so many different versions, right? Like, I too have the King James. I also have a study Bible, but like I've been reading the King James. And that's kind of the whole point that you were saying about like, I think that there is a lot of value in reading it at an older age, because then you can make your own decisions. And I like, that was what Anne's point was that I appreciated, was like, read it and make your own decisions. Like you don't have to believe what everybody else believes. And I think like that was really liberating, right? I mean,
100%.
I told my dad I was reading the Bible and he was like, you'd get more value out of reading the dictionary. I was like, well, but I think that he was probably, you know, he went to Catholic school and
same.
Yeah.
My parents went to Catholic school as well. And when I went home to visit, I was like, do you guys have a Bible? My mom's like, I don't know. And I'm like, okay, well, I feel like I've seen one there before. And I was like, I've been reading it. And she's like, okay, neat. You know, it's like, love that for you. I'm like, okay.
Yeah. That's what my mom said too. She's like, oh, yeah. Okay. Like,
yeah.
Good for
I guess
you.
I don't. Yeah. Okay? I guess I don't. Yeah, 100%. I guess I don't know you well enough to know if people in your life would be like, you're like the last person I would think would read the Bible. But for me, like most people are like, come again? You're reading the what? The who?
I think I mean, as unashamed, what is the word? I'm not ashamed that I'm leaning into this, let's say.
Yeah, no.
But I'm not, and like I am talking about it in, you know, on Instagram or whatever, I'm talking about God. But I think that people would be surprised, honestly. Yeah. And if my parents were surprised, I guess they showed it in a very kind way, like, oh, okay.
That's such a parent response. Oh.
Yeah. What the fuck? You know, like, what is our child doing? Um, but maybe in some ways, maybe not. I think we'll see as I continue to talk about it, how people react. I mean, I'm just going to start telling more people just to see their reaction, to have them be like, oh, all right.
Honestly, when I started telling people that, I mean, some people that I didn't know were down with God are down with him. Like, I had no idea. They're like, oh yeah, I always pray or I always do whatever. But you know, when you start thinking of a certain car and then you start seeing it everywhere, whatever, law of attraction type stuff. So it's like, I feel like I'm noticing things. I'm like, oh, you're wearing a cross necklace. Maybe it's just now that I'm open to it, people are more open to me. Actually, this did happen to me recently. One of my friends, we started talking about my transition to moving to Texas. And she said, God helps those who help themselves. And I was like, she has never talked to me about God before. And so I wrote her back and I was like, you've never talked to me about God. And this is so interesting because I actually started reading the Bible. And I was like, I didn't know that you were into that. And she's like, yeah, it's not something that I always talk about just because, again, of how you can be perceived. And we got in this nice little conversation about it. And I was like, this is so interesting. And I shared it with Anne. And she was like, that's a beautiful thing because that means that you've softened energetically so people can talk to you about it. Where before you were so closed off that people didn't even want to go there.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting how being open to that, I mean, it literally does change your life. It really does.
It does. I mean, and I don't know that I was closed off to it before, but I wasn't open to it. Like, that's how I would explain it. And I feel like now with clients that I have, that is a more consistent conversation, or they bring up their relationship with God or something in that capacity. And like before, I don't know how I would have reacted to that. Probably not, but I'm experiencing something similar with clients, and it's cool. I'm like, I love it, Then I'm like, I love your cross. Fucking weirdo. Honestly.
So I have one of my grandma's old necklaces, and it's a cross necklace. And I started wearing it. Like, I'm dabbling. I'm like putting it out there. She's wearing a cross necklace, guys. So anyway, I became quite attached to it. And then one day I woke up and it was gone. Like, the chain was still there. The cross was gone. And I'm like, oh, what happened? And so same thing. I'm like paranoid. I'm like, does this mean that you don't like me, God? Did I fuck up somewhere? Like, what's happening? And it's so dumb because it's like, it literally is just a piece of metal, but it's symbolic, right? And then so I sat there and I was like, you know what? I hope I find it, or I hope if it is lost that someone who needed to see a sign will find it. So it was gone for about a week, and then I was at work and I'm like taking out the trash and it's on the floor by the trash can. And I'm like, what does that mean? Does that mean that God was trying to throw me away?
Just testing you. See, and that's the thing is people say that God doesn't test you, but I'm like, I think you get tested.
100%. I agree.
Yeah, I think a client of mine said that to me, like, I don't believe that God tests you. And I'm like, oh, I'm being tested constantly. I feel that.
Yeah. No, I think he does. I don't know. God, what do you have to say about that?
Maybe we'll get an answer.
Maybe we'll get an answer. So, what are your goals with God?
I don't. I think to be more patient and not so neurotic with trying to communicate with him. I think that I feel like in order to have communication, I have to get like so bound up and frustrated to hear. Like, I think I had told you this story from last week where like I was just in a place, like I was so stuck in so many ways and I just like couldn't move out of it. Like, it was a hard feeling to explain, but I finally just like sat and cried. And I'm like, all right, like, what is it, dude? Like, come on. Just like, I want to do the work, but like, just tell me And it's like, it's almost like I get this visual of him just being like, you're going to get it. You're going to get it. Like, you need to just chill out and like listen. Or I don't even know. And I think like this is the goal, right? It's this whole experience of not needing to be so hard, because it was like in all of that, I had this realization about generosity. And it was like, once that was kind of starting to come through and I'm like understanding that, and like it was this question of, I'm like, I need to think about how can I be more generous. And it was like in that moment, it was like this golden like light of, and it was so quick, and it was like, now you're getting it, and then backed off. And I'm like, why so quick? Why not more words? Why? But it was like, I could feel it. And I'm like, okay, like that's what I'm missing right now. And I think that previously that used to manifest like as panic attacks. Like I think I would have panic attacks because I would be in this place of literally feeling like I was going to die. And I would be like, okay, I'm willing to listen. What is it? Like I literally feel like I'm going to collapse. So I'm listening. And then I would get these very profound lessons, realizations, or things that I needed to move through. So I think that I am really, really desiring to not have to be in extreme struggle to see the guidance or have the connection. Yeah. Cause like, I don't like it. I don't like it. I want it to just be a little easier.
You don't want to have to be injured in order to get a message?
Yeah. Like, can I just listen?
Across. Yeah. Do you meditate every day?
In some capacity. Yeah.
Okay. Do you feel
probably do a better job?
Okay. Do you have like just quiet time in general that you like dedicate to like even being open to listen?
Yeah, I think that's probably my discipline with it is probably a big part of it. I mean, I do Reiki on myself every day, and that's an opportunity to connect. I mean, sometimes that's like a minute, but like that is part of my commitment, honestly, as a Reiki master, is that you do Reiki on yourself every day. So I do that in some capacity every day, but sometimes I think that it's too fleeting and doesn't really offer an opportunity for connection either. So once again, it's me. Classic. It's all in my control. Literally, I just need to sit down. Oh, there's that again. Sit down, Rachel. Just sit down.
There you go.
Boom.
There you go.
Simple.
Perfect.
What about you? What are your God goals?
What are my God goals? Wow. So I was watching this YouTube video. Shocking. So it's for these guys, and they explain with visuals. They kind of give like a summary of certain books in the Bible. And so I'm on Numbers right now. And so it was about Numbers, and one of the comments said, God is so faithful to you that he will even let you waste your entire life if that's what you want. And I was like, whoa.
Ooh.
Right? And I read that and I was like, shit. Like, I feel like that has been a large part of my life. And that's interesting too, because it's always been my biggest fear, is that I'm going to like look back at my life and regret not doing things.
Yeah.
And so my goal with that is to stop being stubborn. And it's like, I've tried to do everything on my own on so many levels, where it's like, if I really think back, I've always been guided to certain things, and it's, stuff that's not necessarily great for me, but it was essential for character development, let's say. But my goal is to hopefully let go of my ego and to really listen to what God has to say and what he has in store for me, because just this small time frame where I have been reading the Bible and I have been praying, I mean, I would have laughed at myself if I would have said this like even a year ago, but like I have literally felt so happy and so much lighter and so much more like on track with what I should be doing. I mean, even the fact that I'm doing this podcast, it's like, that would have been just an idea. Like, I want to do that. I could do that. I should do that. And it's like something that would have never manifested, and I would have never done it. But I think having that connection with him is like, he has a plan for me. It's like, am I going to listen to that plan? It's a relationship, right? It's like he can tell me what to do. He can put all the cross necklaces on my path that I want. He can, give you all the injuries that you can handle, but ultimately it's up to us if we listen and if we take action on the seeds that he plants in us and the guidance that we do get. So my goal is to have less of me and more of him in my life, more of his guidance versus me thinking that I know what's best for me, when obviously that's, not working out super well for me. That's my goal, is to really just have that faith, even when sometimes it's scary and sometimes it just feels, it's weird that it doesn't feel in alignment with me, because I'm so used to my patterns and I'm so used to doing everything on my own and like forcing stuff to happen and like forcing a connection, and versus just relaxing and trusting that everything's going to work out and all I have to do is listen.
Yeah. Wow. I like that. Similar. It's like learning to listen to the guidance that's available, right? Getting out of your own way. But man, that quote there about he'll let you waste your whole life. I literally was having that conversation I was networking with this woman yesterday, and like she was talking about, her relationship with her parents. And I'm like, someone had reflected to me, like, and this goes for anybody, this isn't just about your parents, of like, can you give people the dignity of their own process and not think that you know what is best for their life? Like maybe that's who they came here to be. And like, that is just another testament to that quote of like, you can do whatever you want. And maybe that is who you came here to be. And that's just, there's a lot there, right?
A lot to unpack. I mean, I even thinking about my own life, I feel like there's so many years that I really didn't do anything. It's like my importance was like working, partying with my friends, traveling. And not to say that those things are bad, but it was like, that was my main focus. I actually said to Anne yesterday that I was thinking about my podcast and I was thinking about all the guests I want to have. And I'm trying to like learn how to edit all these videos, and I'm doing all this research. And she told me, she was like, you seem so much more grounded ever since you started this whole podcast thing. When you don't have something to focus on, when you don't have something that you're excited about, your brain is usually uncomfortable with that. And so then what does it do? It like spirals out and it wants to create all this drama. So she's like, the fact that you're focused on something, you don't have that drama in your life. You don't have that boredom. You don't have that need to like, what can I get myself into? I don't have that kind of thing. So I was telling her yesterday, I started feeling so excited about it, and about like all the people I can talk to and all the ways I feel like I can facilitate these cool conversations into the world. And I told her, this is really sad, but I was like, I think this is the first time I've ever been genuinely really excited about something that didn't involve traveling, partying, and like lusting after someone. You know what I mean? Because I feel like those are the other times I've only like that same excitement, that same like rush. Like those are the only other times that I've like felt that, which is sad, So then I'm like, God, have I just been like wasting my life? Like, have people that have had this connection with God their whole life, have they lived this fully their entire life? I can't even imagine.
Perhaps. Yeah. Or at least to like just have, I think that like the phrase that comes up for me, and I believe that this is in the Bible. I'm not going to be saying it right, but someone had said to me that this quote, like, he did not make me in a spirit of fear. And it's just like, I think that that's, like when you think about faith, like people who are connected to this have faith. And it's like, maybe that's really the underlying theme of like, when you have that connection, you have that faith, you have purpose versus like fucking around, which same, right?
I've done a lot of that.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Far too much. So maybe they have just been thriving.
Well, that's us now.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really wanting it. That's for sure.
Yes. I mean, I will say, I don't think that walking with God or having a relationship with him means that my life is going to be easy now.
No.
During my session with Anne the other day, she said, God will bring you challenges, but it's not to take you off your path. It's only going to make you a better person. Which again, I've heard that in so many different ways from like new agey stuff, but it's like, she's like, he's got you. Any challenge that you have is not meant to bring you down. It's just meant to make you a better person.
Yeah.
And I like felt it with every cell of my being as being fact. And it was the most comforting and like liberating thing that I think anyone has ever told me and that I've ever felt. It was wild. Yeah. So I was like, because that's what always trips me up. Like, I feel like I kind of have all this shit happen to me and I'm like, why? Why is this happening? And I feel like usually like years later down the road, I can look back and be like, oh, that's why I had to go through that. But if a challenge or when a challenge does arise, like hopefully having that faith to be like, all right, this sucks, but something great is going to happen at the end of it. And I've said that to myself, but I haven't actually like said it from like a place of knowing. It's mostly just me regurgitating shit that I've heard like self-help gurus say.
Yeah. I mean, I think like in those moments, that's when I'm like, okay, there's struggle. What's the fucking lesson? I'll do it. What is it though? And it's like, sometimes I'm just not ready to hear it. Right. Like that's like the patience of like, I will tell you the lesson when you're ready to know the lesson versus me being like, I'm struggling. I want to know the answer right now. I will do the work, but I need you to tell me immediately.
Yes. Relatable for sure. All right. Well, I know we could talk about this forever and ever and ever and ever. And I'm sure that I will have you back on here again as our knowledge deepens and as our questions continue to arise. So I have one final question for you. So I was looking at your Instagram and I think it was one of your blogs, you wrote, one of the best questions ever asked is, who are you? So who are you?
That is a great question. And I feel like I am consistently trying to discover that. I guess the best way I can say it is like that I'm a spiritual being having a human experience. Like I very much feel like I am here on a mission to cultivate balance, to embody balance, to bring people closer to joy, to bring people away from fear, closer to love. And I think that God has a very active role in that. And now, like, with that recent connection, that vision and mission has become more clear. Like, when I think about who I am, I'm like, I'm here on a mission. I don't know how else to explain that. I think that a lot of people who have met me like are like, yeah, that's definitely the energy. But
100%.
Yeah, it's more that definition or answer is more about like doing, but that's how it feels right now anyway. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, I have full faith in you on your mission, and I do totally agree that is the energy that you give off. You're an Aries, you're fiery, you just seem very driven as to what you want to accomplish, and you seem open as to how that's going to happen. So thank you for coming on my little podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. And until next time, stay brilliant.
Thank you, my bad.